Hello everyone, welcome back to SPR Pythons. I hope you're doing well. Today we've got a rack room kind of, not tour, but a guide of how I've got this room set up now. So effectively, I've been waiting for an opportunity for a room to become available so that I can scale up and actually get to a point where, really and truthfully, as we're touching on this video, I'm now at maximum capacity, even for when I move out, because I'm still with my mother at the minute, but effectively when I move out, I still won't want to go much more, if at all, past the point I'm at now, which we'll touch on in a minute. But effectively, this video is just going to be talking about the racks that I've gone with, showing you how I actually built the racks, not a guide to how to build an LP rack, but just kind of a time lapse. You get all the points in there if you're looking for to how to build these racks, words. Effectively, and then I'll talk about sort of the tub sizes that I've chose to go with my collection. A little bit on the tubs debate. I'm not going to get too sort of bogged down on that, but a little bit on the tubs debate. And then also kind of the process of going from effectively what I'm leaning on here, the incubator in an egg tub, through to hatching out, and then all the way through to kind of breeding and laying your own eggs if that's what you decide to do, or what I decide for you to do in the sense of a hatchling coming out and being a holdback, or moving it on as a surplus. So that's kind of what we're going to do in the video today. But effectively, just a little bit of history of how long it's taken me, I suppose, to get to a point of being able to have a room. So most of you, I think, will have seen my history video, but those of you who haven't, effectively, I started keeping snakes 9 years ago now. So in 4 years' time, I'll have been keeping snakes for half of my life. But as for now, it's nearly a decade. And effectively, when I got my first corn snake in 2013, I had aspirations of having a reptile room with my auntie. That never came to fruition for one reason or another, pretty much health, unfortunately. But I think it's quite nice because vicariously, the person that got me into reptiles, my aunt, is kind of vicariously living through me, I think, in this room. And I think she would admit that herself. So it's quite nice to be able to go full circle. But then when I got my first sort of royal python, a lesser, in 2014, I walked into, and I don't know if he's still in the hobby anymore. He was about 4 years ago at Doncaster. I met him once, but haven't seen him since. But a bloke called Elliot was who sold me my lesser in 2014. Back, to be fair, I mean, I'm not, when people say back in the day when you get a bumblebee, I mean, you know, me and my auntie, when we had when she had her spider and her pastel, ultimately it was the goal for both of us to see if we could hatch a bumblebee at the time, obviously with her animals. But in 2014, there wasn't a lot about, and I was very happy with a lesser. But effectively, I walked in and he had a snake shed at the time. And from that moment forth, I thought, that's what I want. But it was just getting there. So I waited until I was 18 years old to effectively, I basically put a deposit down on my first pied the day I turned 18. And from there, it's 5 years later, here we go. That's kind of the very quick history. But I've always wanted to have a rack room or have a snake room or whatever you want to call it. So it's great to now finally have one. And as I say, just a little bit on maximization and capacity. So this is my full capacity. So effectively, we'll go through, as I say, what tubs we've got. But what I'm looking at in this room, and I'll put some B-roll in so you guys can see what I'm talking about. But on the wall behind the camera, or next to the camera, which isn't on the frame, we've got 20 FB20 tubs, which are for males. Behind the camera again, so you'll be seeing it roughly now, I should imagine. You've got a 30 tub FB40 rack, which is going to be for females, and grow-ons as well, sort of holdbacks that are growing on past that kilo mark. We've then got, I think, which will just be on the side of the frame. I've not had a look at the frame before this, I must admit, guys. An FB10 rack, which is effectively for holdbacks or surplus that have grown out of the FB5s or LP5s. And then, as I say, we've got the LP5s that are for hatchlings when they come straight out of the egg. And then behind me, we've got an LP70 rack, which is for those bigger females, which do require that space. So that is kind of what I'm working with, but that breaks down to 20 male tubs, 50 female tubs, which is full capacity for me. So I would effectively like to have 20 clutches, around 20 clutches a year. And I look to do about 25 pairings based on my sort of go rate from pairings to actually have an egg. So about 25 pairings, 20 clutches. And what that means is if I say do 20 pairings in the LP70, just for context of making it easy, if we did 20 in there and then 5 pairings in sort of the FB40 rack, that means that I've still got effectively 25 female tubs or grow-on tubs to grow stuff up and cycle through females. Because for me, cycling through those girls is going to be crucial. So, for example, if I just grab out like this ivory pied, for example. So this girl is a nice big, here we go, girl. So this girl's a nice big 3 kilo ivory pied. Now, unfortunately, she's got a little bit stuck shed there. It's the joys of this hot weather. But effectively, this girl had 8 eggs this year, of which I would have definitely held some females back, probably some highway pieds or something like that, that would have eventually gone on to replace this girl because they carried the gravel instead of the yellow belly, which for me is slightly more powerful. You know, if that had been the case, unfortunately those eggs went bad, but just as an example, if those eggs had stayed well and I kept some females back, I would have effectively wanted to raise them, but been able to have a super yellow belly pied for the 2 or 3 years it takes to grow them, to continue developing my highway pied project or whatever it is I'm doing with yellow belly or gravel in the meantime. And that's what I mean by cycling through females. So it's good to have that additional space away from just the breeder females so that I can grow animals up. But effectively, what we should do now is I should just cut this, show you guys the time lapse of me building all the new racks that I've just ordered in from Jesper at LP via Gavin and Mel at LP UK. So you guys can get an understanding of how I built these up, how easy they are to build, and when we come back, talk a little bit about why I chose LP and sort of what tubs I'm going for. So there we go, guys. Effectively, you've just seen how to build, or how I built my LP racks. And what I would say is it's so quick to build them. So 90 hatchling tubs, 20 extra female tubs, and 10 extra male tubs. Now, Mel delivered them to me last Friday at 1 o'clock, and I had everything built up and heated and checked in terms of temperatures and animals in them within 24 hours of them being delivered. They're so easy to build. It literally is kind of, I describe it as like Lego. It's just, you know, apart from the foam, which you've got to cut the heat mat, it's literally level, 4 corner pieces, level, 4 corner pieces, all the way up the top, nice and easy. Pop these kind of, connectors on the side to make sure the rack is sturdy, and that's it, job done. They're literally a piece of cake, and if you reverse it the other way, this isn't a full-time, or it won't be a permanent reptile room for me, or rack room for me. I say that because I think I want to call it a rack room, because for me it is a rack room. It's not a reptile room. I've only got royal pythons, and likewise, it's not a snake room for the same reason. I've only got royal pythons, but I'm not going to call it a royal python room. So I'm like, right, it's a rack room, but it's just trying to remember that. But effectively, whenever I do move out and I get a different rack room, this will effectively just dissolve in sort of probably like an hour, 2 hours, and then I can build it up somewhere else. It's so easy to move it, transport it, and things like that. Like, I'm upstairs. It's so easy to get upstairs. So it's so good in terms of how you actually can build them, how easy they are to build. And also space maximization. So I shout out to Marv. I know Marv's a big fan of the alley racks at MJ Pythons. I went to his barbecue recently. Yes, admittedly, width-wise, you can probably get the same amount of racks in, because at the end of the day, this POM or aluminium leg is going to be about an inch wide, which I think is the same as the generic kind of like Freedom Breeder or what are they called? JVK or Alu racks, other rack types. But what is LP is good for is how thin this level is here. You know, I think if I was a guessing man, you know, this takes 18. If this was Alu rack or something like that, I'm not, you know, Alu rack, I'm not faulting them. It's just that's what's in my head because it's what I've recently seen. You probably only get 15 levels, which is what, 9 tubs. So it's just a lot more space maximized, which for me, you know, I don't know if we'll get B-roll, but you'll probably see how much of a gap I've got on either side of this rack. Maximization is absolutely crucial. This room's, I think, about 11 foot by about 6 or 7 foot. That's it. But I've got a capacity in there for nearly 300 snakes. So these are really good for space maximization. The other thing I really like about the LP racks is just how reliable they are. So I've not got a huge amount of experience with LP. I've been keeping LP for 4 years. I think 3 or 4 years off the top of my head now. I've had nothing go wrong with my LPs in that time. But I mean, if you look at someone who's had them for a long time, just to name one, I think, you know, someone like Tony Wilson or DK Kev, Royal Pythons, you know, I think they've both had LPs for a long time, and I think they'll both tell you that they've not really had any problems with them. So, doing my initial research on which rack to go for a few years ago, I spoke to multiple breeders and they were like, yeah, LPs are the way to go. So they are reliable. And as I say, they're just fantastic. One thing I will point out, Jesper, if you do watch this, I doubt it, is thank you for putting a coating on the side here. Anyone who's built LP will tell you the original stainless steel, which I've got here and here, which you'll have seen on the B-roll, was just so sharp. I cut myself on it so many times. But yeah, fantastic racks. The one flaw I would have with them is just those side pieces do my absolute nutting. And I don't know if it's just me, but trying to get them to link up so you can see how you've got them linked up here in the middle and it's across. If it was that easy to build them, I'd be so happy. But trying to line them up is just a nightmare. So that's the only design flaw I can find with them. But I absolutely love LP is the answer to that. So the next thing I want to touch on briefly is this whole tub debate, which I've seen on Facebook, Instagram, anything to do with the ball python industry recently, because I don't want to be the face of FB40s, LP40s, whatever. They're a tub at the end of the day. But what I would say is, guys, we're all just breeding snakes. Why do we have to have something to argue with each other about? There's been so many arguments about breeding size tubs recently, it's just crazy to me. But I wanted to put some of the myths of FB40s to rest, because ultimately I have used them myself for 3 years. I have now got LPs. What I would say is I'm not on either side of the fence. You know, at the end of the day, I have just consciously decided to get 20 LP70s rather than 30 more FB40s. But in general, I've had no negative experiences with the FB40s. So some of the myths that I've heard is a female can't bowl wrap because they've not got enough space. I'm not going to go into it and show photos, but let me tell you, I walked in here once in the last breeding season and had 11 females just off the top of my head that were bowl wrapping, every single one of them. Bowl wrapping's not a problem. You know, the other things that you got is a male and female can't breed in the space, or they're uncomfortable. At the end of the day, I think Dave Kaufman's just showed a brilliant example in the wild where it took him, 3 days to find a ball python in Gaia? I probably said that wrong. These aren't easy species to find. They're going to find the smallest kind of crevices in whatever they can to hide and sit in there. You know, at the end of the day, I presume if you go and find it, it's unfortunate that Dave didn't, but if Dave went and found a female and male ball python breeding in Africa, I guarantee they didn't go and find some great big field with elephants walking around in it to breed in. It's just a metaphor, but I'm just saying, you know, at the end of the day, this species doesn't necessarily need the most amount of space in the world. And some of the other considerations is just effectively, if you're actually looking at the volume in the actual tub itself, volume being sort of width, height, and length all in one, I don't want to be that guy, but it is worth considering that if you're breeding in a 33 litre, you're actually giving the animals less space. So the volume that's made up of those three measurements that I've just told you, you've actually got more space in an FB40. So it's just something to consider when that argument or that debate is going on. And as I say, at the end of the day, I've consciously made a decision to have both. But I would say on that, for a final piece on the why FB40s are good, it's good for males, it's good for females. Ultimately, you can move animals, as I'll touch on a little bit later on with holdbacks, as to when I move them up. You can move things into a relatively small size. The dark tubs mean they keep feeding, my experience. But space maximization is going to be a big player part for a lot of people. And this is just something I wanted to touch on. For myself, I just work with pieds, as you know. Yes, I work with different types, DG, clown, calico, you know, sort of codon combos. But at the end of the day, I still only work with one recessive. Now, in order to get my collection to a point where ultimately, if we look at my pairings coming up this year with the males I've got coming in from Aussie that's been generated through income from what I've hatched the last few years, that has all been made up by having a maximization sort of outlay where I've been able to do all the genetic projects I wanted to do. But I couldn't have done that if I'd have only got the 20 LP or V70 tubs, whatever you want to call them. So, you know, in that 30 space, if I've got, say, 9 tubs for Clown Pied, 9 tubs for DG Pied, and then 9 tubs for Codon projects, imagine how far I can take things. Whereas if I'd only got 20 tubs, that takes it down to what? 4, and 5 or something like that. You know, it seriously eliminates the amount of projects you can be working on. So if you're working on DG, Clown, Hypo, Pied, you're not going to have a lot of space to do anything. You might have literally one hypo project. I'm used to saying Pied. One hypo project. You might have one Clown project because that's all you've got space for. Whereas if you had those extra 10 tubs in the same amount of space, it allows you to maybe have an extra Clown project or an extra hypo project. Whatever you're passionate about. I'm just saying the space maximization on the 40s is very good. And at the end of the day, if the US breeders can use them without getting called out, why are we arguing about it in England? Let's just enjoy the species, enjoy the animals for what they are, and ultimately congratulate each other when we do well, because that's what's best about this hobby. So now we'll move on to the tub sizes, just briefly talk about what tub sizes I've decided to go for. I had to bear in mind space maximization when doing this, but ultimately these are the kind of tubs that I would have gone for anyway, I feel like. So ultimately we'll just work through how it goes from incubator to effectively adulthood. So this female here, for example, she's a pastel orange dream pied, 66% het clown. She literally hatched out and had her first shed sort of today. And she was from the orange dream pied het clown to the pastel double het clown pied clutch. But she'll go effectively straight into an FB5 or an LP5, sorry, whichever way you want to call it. They're very much the similar same tub. So this is an LP5 or an FB5 tub. Very small tubs. You know, it's literally 4 hatchlings when they come straight out of the egg or straight out of the incubator. You know, I don't know how long they're staying here for because I've not got experience with it yet, but I'd imagine they'll be able to stay in here till up to about 6 months old. Perfect starter tub. From there, they then go on to a slightly larger tub. They've got a 3.25 ounce deli cup, I should mention. So the slightly larger tub that I then put mine into is an FB or an LP10 tub. So it's a lot wider, as you can see. This is actually what I put a clutch of eggs into. I slightly lie on the path from the incubator because I'll put the clutch in there. For example, this has got the recent Clown Pied clutch in that tub, for example, before they then go into the LP5s. Back into this, so they'll go into this after about 6 months or about, I don't know, 300 grams maybe. I'll then put my holdbacks into this, of which they'll then stay in here for quite a while, to be fair, because I then keep my animals in here until about 600 or 700 grams, and then effectively, depending on if they're male or female, they'll then go up into whichever tub is relevant for them. And what I mean by that, if I just come over to the side here for a second, is this is an FB20, so obviously you can see a lot wider tub, and this is what I'll then put my males into. So my males, if I just grab an example male out for you, this is actually sold, but as a prime example, so this male here is the orange dream pied het clown I've just referenced that sired 4 clutches for me, I think off the top of my head this year and 4 last year. So he's doing a lot of breeding for me, but I keep my males small. So he's about 1250 grams, which is about maximum I keep my males at. And how I do that is I just feed them less, quite frankly. So when they're not breeding, I'll feed them once every month. And when they're breeding, it'll be once every other week. So what's that? About 16 to 18 meals a year. It's not a lot of food, but it gets them, keeps them healthy. You can see he's not skinny. He's a nice weight, still doing the job. But what it does do for me is it stops my males going off of food when I'm pairing. Ow. Don't know if he just bit me or whether that was his tail. Probably going to look really stupid looking back at his tail, I think. But felt like a bite there to begin with. But effectively, so I'll put a male into an FB20 tub, and then the females will go into an FB40. So I'll just grab an example female that I put into an FB40 for you and how long they stay in there for, and give you an idea of the tub as well. So moving on, this is the female tubs that I then put them into. So we've just referenced these, obviously. It's the FB40. I won't go into it in too much depth because we have just obviously discussed it. But that's then what I put a female into. Now, I'll put them into those tubs at about 600 grams from the FB10 tubs. So this girl has just gone into her FB40. She's about 600 grams if I was a guesser. Something a bit different for you as well. So not a pied. So this is a Mojave Fire Clown, but it is posset pied. A beautiful female. I wasn't a big fan of this when it first came, to be honest. I was a bit like, oh, I don't know if I like that colour. As she's growing, she's got this really nice green tinge to her. Yeah, sorry, I might do another video on her, I don't know, because as she's grown, I'm really starting to like her. But yeah, so she'll now stay in this tub until about 3 kilos, at which point I then might move her up if she wants to go, and this is what I was referring back to about having, it's nice to have the bigger options for females, but she might decide she wants to stay in this tub. But otherwise, they will then go into the FB70 tub, which again, we referenced a minute ago. So that is the FB70 or the LP70 tub, a much bigger tub, as you can see. When I say much bigger, I've seen some B-roll a minute ago, and I'll do some as well, so you can see just how much wider the LP70 tubs are. They're not a huge amount. In fact, I'll probably put the B-roll in there just so it makes sense of where you can see what I'm talking about. But effectively, then they'll go into these larger tubs. So if we just take out an example of one that I have currently got in a LP70, is this nice big, beautiful yellow belly het pied female. I have got a clutch of eggs. I'm forgetting what I've got. I have got a clutch of eggs from this girl. So she goes into an LP70 effectively. But that's about it. That's the tub sizes that I've decided to go with. But yeah, that for me is kind of the course from from incubator all the way through to pairing. And just touching a little bit more on the pairings. If we should put these females away, and then I'll touch on the pairings a little bit and how I'm going to do them. So yeah, just touching on the pairings, effectively what I'm going to look to do this year is probably do, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, try and put the 20 females I'm going to pair in the LP70s, and then do the final pairings in the FB40s, because that would then give the male and female a bit more space to move around in. But ultimately, as mentioned at the start of the video, that's not crucial for me. And with regard to, that was another thing I was going to touch on with the tub debate actually. I saw someone say that a female can't get around their clutch of eggs. At the end of the day, I've not got a lot of experience, but I've had one female off the top of my head, the cinnamon het pied in my first year breeding, that didn't coil on her eggs, but coiled round them. In my experience, everything coils on the eggs, and therefore they don't need a huge amount of space because the eggs don't take up a huge amount of space. But yeah, I will probably look to do most of my pairings in the 70s, but we'll see how it plays out for my first year with those tubs available to me. But yeah, that's kind of the room. The only thing I've not shown you, I'll maybe show you a little bit. So effectively on the shelves to my left here, I've just got all my cleaning utensils, some mice, because effectively what I do is I feed my my hatchlings 1 or 2 live mice when they hatch out the egg, and then do normally convert them straight onto defrost. And then above that is just all my records and deli cups. So as mentioned on the left, you've got the 16-ounce deli cups, which go in the FB20s and FB40s. Then I've got 8-ounce, which go in the FB10s and the LP or FB70s. And then finally the 3.25s, which are the tiny little ones that go into the LP or FB5 tubs. So the deli tubs are brilliant. For me, they're fully recyclable, which is crucial, because effectively the water here is so hard. That's why I decided to go for deli cups, effectively. But yeah, that is kind of what I am working with in terms of deli cups. The only consideration I'm going to put out there for anyone thinking of going to deli cups, the 3.25 ounce, I couldn't find any quantities less than 2,500. So have someone just store them, because you have to order a fair few of the 3.25s. But I hope you guys have enjoyed today's video. It's really been exciting getting this room going. The only other thing is I've got a dartboard up there, but that's for me. But that is the room. The only thing to mention, the doors are now open. I've been cautious for the last couple of years, sort of knowing the value of my collection, and that's not arrogance. It's just me being cautious and having my own privacy with my own animals. But I have opened up my doors again, so if you want to come and visit and have a look at the animals for yourself, or when you're collecting an animal or whatever, that's absolutely fine, because quite frankly, now I've got a CCTV camera in here. I've got no reason not to effectively say, welcome, come and have a coffee and let's talk about snakes. And that's ultimately what I like doing. So it's great to do it at Manchester now, not at Doncaster. But likewise, SPR Pythons is open if you want to come into the rack room. So thank you very much for watching the video, guys. Stay tuned. Plenty of videos coming out this year. I don't know when this video is coming out, to be honest, but I've got pickups coming from Justin and Ozzy. I've got eggs hatching out, eggs to update you on. So plenty of videos. So make sure you hit the like button, notify yourself by hitting the bell, and subscribe. I don't normally do that, so I think I've done it in the completely wrong order. But thank you very much for your support, and I'll see you on the next one. Cheers, guys.